Hi everyone, Pastor Jim with you. I'm sitting in the beautiful hills just outside of Challis, Idaho, and I'm at the Christian Motorcyclists Association State Rally this weekend. And our regular service in downtown at Canyon Crossing Church will take place at normal time. And there are going to be a couple of guys sharing, so if you're inclined to go and visit Canyon Crossing, I really encourage you to do so. We won't be having a live stream because I won't be there and I'm the one that uses the camera. So anyway, I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you today. It's going to be a pretty short video. I'm sure a lot of you will be happy to know that. But we've been doing a study in 1 Corinthians, as you well know, and we just got started. We're still in the first chapter. But what I wanted to talk to you today was about the wisdom of God versus the wisdom of man. You know, we live in an upside down world, and I'm not just talking about the craziness that's happened in just even a generation of people so far, because we've seen that. Things have changed a lot, values have changed and so forth, but in truth, this world has been upside down from the very beginning. I've been reading a book by that title, actually, talking about upside down spirituality. And one of the things that I think is kind of illustrative of that whole idea is if you remember the old time cameras back in the 1800s, at the time when Abraham Lincoln was president of the United States, the way they took photos, the camera was a big box. The photographer would get underneath kind of a big canvas cloth and so forth, and he would have a manual shutter slide, and when he would look through the viewfinder, everything in his vision was upside down because the lens basically inverted everything. And so the photographer had to have skills to be able to look at that upside down picture and frame things and so forth. And then when he was ready, he would pull that manual shutter away from the film to expose it, and then he would shut that thing and protect those plates, take them in, and the film would be developed. And so what he was looking at appeared to him to be upside down. And the truth of the matter is, we live in a world where we think things are right side up, but the truth is they're not. They're actually upside down. The Bible tells us that the wisdom of God in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 11, 12, 13, talks about the wisdom of God is wiser than the wisdom of this world. In fact, the foolishness of God is even wiser than the wisdom of this world. And the Apostle Paul talks about the fact that for the Greeks, it was foolishness. And the reason for that is because in their eyes, their heroes were always people that were strong, people that were able to vanquish the evil or the bad. And in fact, if you really did an in-depth study of the pantheon of the gods that the Greeks and the Romans worshipped and followed, they were really nothing more than just exalted people with the same kind of bad habits and tempers, and basically just humans magnified with external powers or extra powers and so forth. And it's kind of interesting that in the cinema that we look at in the last 8-10 years, a lot of the movies that have come out in recent years are these resurrected superheroes and resurrected gods of the Roman and Greek pantheon, and they're just people with powers, and that's really all they were. But the God of the Bible, to the Greek person, especially when you talk about Jesus being one who was good, and they would say, well, how could he be good if he let evil conquer him? And if there was a God that was working with him, how could that God allow evil powers to overcome him and subdue him if he was good? And in fact, part of the philosophy of the Greeks was what was called Gnosticism. There was a dualistic idea that anything that had material possession or material substance was by nature less than or more evil, if you will, subservient to. And because the more material you were, the less divine, the less good you were. And so for Jesus to be a human being, coming in the form of a human, to have a body of flesh and bone and blood, he couldn't have been good in the sense of what they labeled goodness to be. And yet, he allowed himself to be overrun by evil human beings, people of power, his own people betrayed him, even though he was doing good things like healing the sick and giving sight back to the blind and those kinds of things. And yet, he was crucified on a cross as a common criminal. And in that crucifixion, the Gentile believers, the Greek people, looked at that and said, "You got to be crazy to worship somebody like that. He's got no power at all. He lost. He succumbed to powers that were greater than him. Obviously, they must have been better than him. And so to believe in someone like that would be foolishness." To the Jews, it was a stumbling block, because the God that they were looking for, the Messiah that they were looking for, was supposed to come as a king and a ruler, and he was supposed to subdue all and vanquish all of the kingdoms of this world that had oppressed the Jewish nation since the time after Solomon. And so when Jesus came, and instead of coming as a great kingdom warrior, he came in weakness, and he came turning everything that they had been believing and taught upside down. He said the way to greatness in this world is actually to be the servant of all. Everything he said was backwards. He said, if you really want to be a person that has a significant impact on the world, then give your life away. If you want to live, lose your life. All of these things were things that were not just pithy little statements that he made to try to attract a following or get people to scratch their heads, but he was actually speaking the truth. The way to greatness is servanthood. The way to life is to give your life away. And that's exactly what he did. That's how he demonstrated his own life. By giving himself on the cross of Calvary, he surrendered himself that we might have life through him. He served. Though he was God of creation, though he deserved all the worship, though he deserved that every single creature would fall on their face and worship him, instead, he served us. That great story of the Last Supper in John chapter 13, the Bible tells us that he took and stripped himself of his outer garments, wrapped himself with a towel, began to wash the feet of the disciples. And they thought, what's he doing here? This is not right. This is he's the master. He shouldn't be doing this. And if you recall the story, even Peter protested and said, "Lord, you'll never wash my feet." And Jesus said, "If you don't allow me to wash your feet, you have no part of me." And then Peter said, "Well, if that's the case, then wash everything." And then Jesus said, "Listen, you call me Lord, you call me Master. That's true. That's right. So if I, being your Lord, washed your feet, how much more do you need to wash one another's feet? How much more do you need to serve each other? How important is it that you give your life in service to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords?" And so he demonstrated it. He didn't just say, "This is what you're supposed to do," and walk off, but he did it himself. And he gave his life on the cross for each and every one of us. And so when God talks about his foolishness being wiser than the wisdom of men, what he's saying is that nobody could have ever figured this out except in the wisdom of God. That the way to life is to lose it. And I could tell you as a Christian, and I don't get this right every day, don't kid me, or let me kid you, or kid yourself about me. I struggle every day with my own feelings and my own thoughts and my insecurities and my desires to accomplish things and my ambitions and different things of that nature. But I could tell you that it's in service that you find the greatest joy. When I have an opportunity to pray with people, when I have an opportunity to serve people, whether it's serving in a meal or even just sitting down and having conversation with somebody about the things of the Bible, I find the greatest joy when I have an opportunity to tell people what Jesus did on the cross for us. There's no greater joy. When I am able to feed someone, maybe sometimes there'll be people who'll come by and they're broke, and I could take them for a meal and sit down with them and share with them a little bit and feed them. These are the times that I find the greatest joy. And so it really does work. But each of us, I think, has a battle going on constantly, because there's parts of our being that still want to be on the top, want to be served rather than served. But I can guarantee you the way of God is the best way of all. So Jesus is the wisdom of God. Jesus is the one who, through his sacrifice on the cross, through his death and resurrection and ascension into heaven, makes it possible for you and me to be able to know the living and true God. And when we receive him into our life and when we surrender ourselves, he gives us the power to die to ourselves so that we might live. He gives us the grace to be able to humble ourselves rather than exalt ourselves, knowing that he will raise us up in due time. I just hope that these thoughts are a blessing to you. I know this is shorter than normal, but I had a little bit of a break here at our rally, and I wanted to just send this message on to you. And so God bless you. Thanks for watching. I'm Pastor Jim Evans at Canyon Crossing Church. I hope that you'll come and visit us sometime. And next week I'll resume the series in 1 Corinthians, and we'll also live stream. Till then, God bless you. Have a great, great weekend.